Welcome back, Day Camp friends, to the Day Camp Podcast. I'm Andy Pritikin, the director of Liberty Lake in the Philly suburbs of New Jersey.
I'm Sam Thompson from Crystal Lake Park District, Crystal Lake, Illinois.
And I'm Aaron Gluckstein from Camp Robin Hood, located just outside of Toronto in Canada.
And we're Day Camp professionals joining forces to provide a forum for summer camp pros like you to share ideas and best practices across North America and beyond. And for today's podcast, we are joined by the Wittenberg family. Eric from the Berkshire Soccer Academy and Camper Machine, and his sister, Allison, longtime membership director and trainer at the American Camp Association, New York, New Jersey, and now working as a consultant herself. So, Allie.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Always a pleasure. So why don't you just give people a little bit background about you before this goes for the next hour?
Sure. So I, like most of the people you talk to, are from the ACA network. I'm a lifelong camper. I started when I was 3, going to a day camp in Westchester, Elmwood Day Camp. And I would like to say the rest is history because it just kind of took off from there. I was lucky to go to that day camp for several years. And then I went to a travel camp and then a sleepaway camp, Southwoods in the Adirondacks, which all of those experiences treated me well and kind of definitely shaped me in the person I am today. And I think I took maybe a summer or 2 off, but it's pretty blurry because I know I started working as soon as I could. And I started working at Elmwood the Day Camp and kind of went through the ranks there from lifeguard to counselor to specialist to bus counselor to bus driver to division head.
Bus driver? Wait, you drove a bus?
Yeah, that's my fun fact I use a lot.
You're CDL'd?
License. Yes, sir.
Nice.
All 5 of the people in my family have our CDL. There were at one time 3 buses parked at our house. But anyway, yeah, and so I worked at Elmwood for several years and just never left and really loved, the people I got to work with there and different age groups that I got to spend time with. And then I did work as a teacher for a few years, but I kind of then skirted back to the camp world and was lucky to spend about 8 years at ACA New York, New Jersey, a proud sponsor, I know. And I really had an interesting experience there with membership and training. So most of my time was spent supporting various camps in the New York, New Jersey area, and also doing outreach and speaking to programs that had never heard of the American Camp Association or had heard of us but didn't really know how they fit in our organization. And then also doing a lot of training and consulting with different programs in various settings. So everybody from the YMCAs in New York City and private sleepaway camps and everything in between. So I got to experience a really big range of camp beyond what I knew it as when I was younger.
Right. So just the 5 CDL bus drivers in the Wittenberg family, where do you rank in safest?
Oh, that's a subjective question.
Yeah, I'm asking you for your subjective answer. I
never had any professional incident, so I feel like I rank pretty high. I don't know that all of my family members can say the same.
That was sort of passive aggressive, wasn't it, Eric?
I've got to jump in here on that. In evaluating safety, you have to look at hours on the road.
That's true.
It's a ratio. It is a ratio.
I mean, this is the same way, insurance calculates the driving policy, right?
All right. So we're handing off now to brother Eric, which, by the way, let's give a shout out to Mom, okay, who was a director at Elmwood Day Camp for years, okay, which is, what bequeathed these 2 youngsters. Yeah. All right.
And that is really the story. We never would have. And we have an older brother too, who is like the prodigal son that he didn't go into camping in some capacity. Mm-hmm. He's got a lowly law enforcement official job. Just kidding. I just had to. Okay, moving on. But truly, had my mom not started working in the preschool at Elmwood Day Camp for a couple of years when we were before Allison and I were born, she would never met Jeff Ackerman, and who they ran camp together for almost 30 years. And then we never would have been in that world had we not kind of literally kind of skirted in.
We love you, Bobby.
Yeah. And I was just talking to her. She was recalling the days where you were an intern at Elmwood Day Camp, because that's really the connection, as like however many years ago she mentioned it, I won't say.
But it was a while.
Yeah. But anyway, so like Allie, I grew up at Elmwood Day Camp, and just couldn't get enough of same thing, from athletic specialists to running the athletic department to planning bus routes to training people to pass their CDL tests, which is the most unique camp position. I think if you're not in a state where you train people to drive buses to extend camp, it's a very unique world.
Unique, is that a different way of saying thankless and awful?
I liked it a lot because I know.
All right. Well, look, this is why you chose the path into automated marketing. It's very similar.
And we took it seriously. The camp day starts when the bus pulls up, and so we had an Elmwood tape that we put in with the camp songs.
Yeah, well, listen, there's a great episode on transportation with Larry Bell from Robin Hood, which is where it all began. So for those of you that haven't heard that episode, please tune in because you'll get the history on that. All right, so take us.
And because of my work with Larry, I always had it in the back of my mind that I wanted to get my license, even though we can't legally do it here in Ontario. I wouldn't be able to drive kids around, but I just wanted to do it for fun.
Yeah, and there's definitely going to be a picture we can pull up of the 3 buses that for the year that I was driving and Allison was driving, and I think my mom had like an emergency bus that she was like as the director of like 30 years, she was filling in for a day of driving the bus or something. But so anyways, so after my Elmwood experience, I had done a bit. I actually helped an Elmwood parent start an after-school sports club. And then I helped Sam and Alicia Woodmont take over Candy Mountain Day Camp and turn it into Woodmont Day Camp for 2 years. And then I kind of felt like I had this legacy camp world and this takeover day camp world experience in the private day camp scene. And I wanted something different. So I went back to school for educational sports psychology. And then I started a CrossFit in San Francisco. And then my wife and I met Dan Zenkel and decided to start the Berkshire Soccer Academy for Girls, which was really a hybrid of a traditional soccer camp where there's high-level training and the traditional camp setting, so cabins and lake and fields and groups. And really, the competition 8 years ago was exclusively universities for a girls' soccer overnight camp. And so that's really where I kind of started dabbling in this world of camp, but not camp. And then ultimately from that, and to start all these, organizations, I really just needed to become an internet marketer and figure out how digital marketing works so that camp people can get more kids to camp. So that's what brought on Camper Machine ultimately.
Right. So just so you don't have to brag about yourself, I'll brag about you a little. So Eric has constructed this company called Camper Machine, which is automated marketing for your camp, where he has thought out lots and lots of variables that most of these HubSpotty kind of Salesforce things wouldn't really think of because they're not camp people. So Eric really gets into the head of the consumer, and his experience, and the reason why he and I love this topic is because at my day camp, where I market to mostly people who have no idea what camp is, right? Eric had to do that. Eric had to market to people across the country looking, potentially looking to send their kids for a week of soccer in the mountains, right? That's a unique sell, right? So when Eric and I talked about this at ASA National, we're talking about it at Tri-State next week. We start by explaining to, most people in camp are diehard camp people, and therefore we're screwed up. It's hard for us to explain camp because we're, the whole expression preaching to the choir, we're the preachers and we're just used to preaching to the choir. And that's why so many camps, when you look at their marketing, it's all these insider kind of things like memories that last a lifetime and all these phrases like the magic of camp, and really most people think we're crazy. I had a conversation with somebody the other day, one of my camp counselors who went off to college, and you hear this all the time, right? So one of your camp people goes off to college and they're making all these new friends, and what do all their friends tell them? Stop talking about camp. Stop talking about your camp friends. Like that's all you talk about. Like it's this crazy world that we have no idea what you mean, right? And when you're creating the proposition of camp to these people, you have to put yourself in their shoes.
This is it's the supreme irony in camping, and that your camp world is literally the most exclusive network that you're part of.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We had, and keeping it in the family realm. And my family, my mom was at Elmwood Day Camp for almost 30 years. Allison and my brother and I were there for each 10 plus years. My poor dad was excluded every Sunday. All we could do is like run our mouths about camp and how great it was. And he would, this phenomena of people not really being able to control their love kind of ironically creates this little bubble of exclusion.
Yeah. That's a unique point that we touched on. No doubt about it. So, if you look at the statistics about kids in America that go to camp, I think you can say that roughly 5 out of 6 kids does not go to camp. So most people don't go to camp, right? So 5 out of 6 kids don't go to camp. They don't go to camp because generally their parents didn't go to camp, right? So when you're talking to these families, that these neophytes, as I call them, they don't understand what you're talking about. They're not speaking the same language as you. And part of it is because their parents didn't speak that language, right? So you're trying to it's almost like you're looking for immigrants, camp immigrants, right? To be the first people to hop on that boat and go across the Atlantic and come, like that's literally what it's like mentally, right? And in a matter of trust, giving you their children. I mean, you talk about the cultural aspects, right? Hispanic families, like they do not want to keep their kids out of their sight, generally. Although we have been doing very well with Asian families and Indian families who want enrichment for their kids. So they're willing to take a leap for that. But for the general camp, your kid's going to have a great time and make friends and feel good about themselves kind of thing. There's a lot of fluff in our language generally that, like Eric sort of alluded to, it could sound like you're not part of the club, because it's like an insider kind of game.
And by the way, that exclusion was also happening with my peers, my age group. When I would go back to college and I would talk about camp, they'd be like, "Oh, you're doing that again? Or you're not getting a real job?" So it does cross different generations with people who either haven't gone to camp or don't necessarily see the value of it long term. Because people were saying to me, "Oh, like another summer?" And I was like, "This is so meaningful and amazing." So it's also the fact of if you've experienced it, but have had different value placed in other parts of life,
Mm-hmm.
And for us, sorry, Andy, for us, we've actually seen the positive side of this from a staff recruitment standpoint, at the very least, in some cases with campers who go to schools in areas where we're very prominent. That's how our word of mouth has worked, but it's worked really well for our staff because we have these these students that come back from go away to university and they spend their whole year talking about camp, and then they bring 5 friends the next summer to work for us, and and that's great for us. So it's been a great tool.
Right. So I think as day camps, we are fortunate in that we can always be climbing the daycare tree. There's so many families out there where mom and dad both work nowadays, and they need a great place for their camp and they want what's best for their kids. And we always have that angle, right? But if there is a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home grandmom or a stay-at-home aunt or whatever, then it becomes like, well, then why should I do this? I don't understand,
Andy, the good thing about park districts is you're right in the community. And so a big sell for us is if you're moving into the area or you're trading schools, you can meet people from all over the community at camp. So when you trade schools or you move, you already know people. You've got a base.
Right. And this is from the lady whose camp is called Crystal Lake, which could have different connotations. But in all seriousness, I think that when I taught camp to most of these families, I just imagine in their head that they're thinking about Friday the 13th or meatballs or, whatever these goofy camp, I mean, last year's theme for America Horror Story was summer camp, right? Camp does not always get put into the best light. I would say rarely gets put into the best light in media. Right. And if you read the newspapers around the time of summer camp, I think that the negative stories versus the feel-good stories are, it's quite heavy, between the kids getting left on the buses at day camp or the accidents that happen and that kind of thing. You don't really see articles about the fun time kids are having at camp. Right.
That stuff's password protected.
At many camps, yes.
But so that I don't want to, before we go deeper into this point though, the thinking about what you're telling people you're giving them, and then the service of camp, that took, and the startup lens of, startup from scratch camp for Berkshire, that was a big 4 years learning lesson, to like, we thought we could sell, look at soccer, but traditional camp together. Isn't that what you want? Mm-hmm. Wink, wink, nod, nod, parent. And they don't know that they want that because they don't have a concept for it. It doesn't fit into their framework. So that's I think it's such an interesting exercise. Like even the parks instance of, there might be however many 100 families that come in. That's a very unique value proposition. It's like, get to know the kids that you're going to be in school with potentially. So I just think that's a perfect example that wasn't front and center in mind, but there's probably 100 potential instances of that for all the different kinds of camps that need to continue popping up or emerging.
Right. So the great point, but I before we move on to like that to like what people need, what they don't even realize they need kind of point, right? Just some aspects about what our camps have that people don't even realize that camps have, right? So people worry about Friday the 13th. They don't realize you have a security guard, right? They worry about their kids drowning. They don't realize you have 15 lifeguards at the pool, right? Like we can't take a lot of these things that we in the choir take for granted about camp. Well, of course they have lifeguards. Like I am telling you, most people that check out my camp do not realize I have lifeguards. Like they wouldn't even think that we would. There's no assumption there. So we have to speak in this plain language and get it out there and not take anything for granted. But what Eric was just touching on there was the need. What is the need for a kid that's going to your soccer camps, right? So we talked about this a little bit once before, and Eric said that there's basically like he's got two kind of general ones, right? You have the kids that are the sports lunatics, right? And they're looking to one day play in the World Cup, right? And then you have the people that are a little more rational that are like, I want my kid to have a great time, and get exercise and be outside.
Totally. But the thing that they share is that when they're searching, they want the place that'll help their kid get better at their sport, right? It's like no one was searching for the place where my daughter can get better at soccer and has a lake, because that's not a prime, it's not, that objective is not even on their list. And so really kind of distilling down to what the job, as I'm sure we'll get into later, that camp needs to fulfill to be in the conversation is just so interesting to me. Because once you get into the camp world, it's like a trance. You get stuck talking about lifelong memberships, and it doesn't land well when you talk to somebody from your parks, Sam, I'm sure, in your parks district, like, in 25 years, they're going to be going to each other's weddings. It's going to be so beautiful. And it's like the person just moved to your state and they don't know anything from anything. They're just looking to get settled. And so really it just takes a high, and again, to the irony of being deep in the camp world and kind of making the translation out, the empathy we have for a new kid on arrival day, we kind of lose when we talk to a new lead that just became interested. And so it's kind of it's an interesting void there.
Yeah. So in regards to the job that's being done by your camp, let's just talk about that a little bit. So I mentioned daycare as the no-brainer for day camps, right? But I also touched on everybody wants their kid to be a better person, right? Everybody wants the kid to be successful. Like everyone wants the kid to succeed, right? I think that's a commonality for any camp, for any family, right? Whether you're, living in the poorest situation in a third world country or the richest situation in a first world country, like you want what's best for your kid. And there are so many aspects of what we do in our camp that can help achieve that. And to me, that's the educational part that I like working on with these leads, with these new families, right? Is to get them to understand that. And without just superlatives and hyperbole and like phrases and pictures, like translating that to the neophyte, right? So one of the things that I do to parents as they're giving me these befuddled looks as I'm trying to explain this stuff to them is I say, because they probably didn't go to camp, but they probably went to college. So I say, do you remember when you were a freshman in college and you went off, that first year and you didn't know anybody and you were totally, you had anxiety, you had worry and excitement and you were a little scared and you met all these people and you were like emotionally volatile and like your sensors are up, and they were like, yeah, they listen to me. And I stop and I say, I bet you're still friends with some of those people. And they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, those some of my best friends from 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, whatever, yeah. And I was like, that's what camp is like. Like you're getting put out of your comfort zone. You're with all these relative strangers, having to do things together, like build cardboard box boats in the pool or whatever, and, it does something. It creates a bond that is something that kids are not getting now so much because they don't just go outside and play anymore.
But that's even that is like the pinnacle of the pitch to a non-camp family, right? Like that's the ultimate life enhancement is this transformative network that you grow with over time. That's like got this shared community. But how do you, the process to get from, did you know that we have lifeguards to your kid's going to be going to weddings in 20 years with their camp friends from, the first grade group or whatever it is, that, the progression, I just love kind of mapping out and discovering the sales routes. And it's, I'm going to use the S word. You can bleep it out later.
Well,
like that sales conversation of going from, there's almost like a, hierarchy of needs for a camp sale, right? It's like, are you trusted and safe? Is there like a bigger, broader thing? And then there's, what's the cherry on top stuff?
And I think ACA accreditation isn't an easy sell. I mean, it is a stamp of approval that parents think, okay, somebody inspected, but they don't understand it either. So how do we tie that in, or how do we use that to show the safety part and then get to the cherry on top?
Yeah,
and I think that's an interesting visual, because that cherry on top, or the way people get to that cherry on top, is very different depending on who you're talking to, right? For the people that know about ACA and know about accreditation and are calling to find out if a camp is accredited or not, that's one set of parents. But other people who don't know about accreditation and are maybe, like to Sam's point, wanting a sense of community or have a time restriction and scheduling and logistics is their first priority. Are you available? Can I afford you? And can I drop my kid off between these hours and pick them up now? That might be their first tier. So it's a very wide range of sales that you're kind of tapping into depending on the audience.
Yeah. Well, and it's a cost benefit analysis that's going on in their head, right? So you're explaining these benefits to them, but then they're contemplating the cost, and then they're weighing, is it worth it, right? And I talk to people all the time that are like, oh, they say they can't afford camp. And I was like, yeah, they think they can't afford camp, right? Because guess what? They're going to Disney next week and they're spending a ton of money there. Okay. I have a neighbor that goes to Disney twice a year and doesn't send their kids to camp because it's too expensive. All right. So it's a cost benefit analysis, right? So they think that standing in line for Space Mountain is more important than, however I'm translating the life skills that they're going to learn at my camp. I haven't succeeded in breaking through there. And Eric is an automated marketing guy. So he's got this, in his brain, this little drip campaign that's happening, where he's feeding them to teach them over the course of time. So I love getting into his head to sort of figure it out, because it's one thing, Eric, if this person inquired in January and now you've got like a few months to like do this, but it's the average schnook that's looking for a camp, it's springtime and the window is tight,
Totally. But but this is why I think it's so much fun. It's a stone not many camp people, turn over to see what's there in the sales cycle process of you have 9 days to communicate trust and, move somebody towards the cost benefit analysis being favorable towards going, right? So how do you go from a neophyte to, oh, do you have lifeguards? Oh, wait, you mean included in this is going to be an instructional swim? So now I'm saving $100 for the 12 pack that I was going to buy in the fall for a swim lesson. It's not going to be as effective because there isn't that extra hour of free swim afterwards or whatever it is. And so being able to package that like middle tier on that little pyramid of what you get from camp and the right time and place. I love that. Again, from being inside of camp, it's hard to see though. Like at Elmwood, I didn't realize that, I would eventually got to a point where I was taking families on tours and things like that. I didn't realize that the key selling point for most of those sorts of day camps, the private day camps with pools that offer instructional and free swim, is that their kid is, and if they're first or second grade, you're going to be like a swimmer and almost drown proof at the end of the summer of 8 weeks.
Yeah.
Like that is a real thing. And now that I have a 7-year-old myself, I'm like, honey, we gotta get this kid in an instructional swim, free swim environment for a tight, compact period. And so it's like, that is a sales message that I would imagine for a lot of camps, if you're delivering that, that's a huge bridge from supplementing an alternative like daycare to enhancing the life. And what kind of parent ensures that their kid can swim? A good one.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's a great way to get those people in the door, and then you sell them on everything else once they're there, because that's something everyone can relate to very easily.
Well, yeah. So like, what are other great intangibles like that, right, that your program offers? We can't talk in generalities here because there's every kind of day camp in the world listening to us, but daycare is that one concrete thing. If you offer swim, yes, I agree. I have all these great character values that are like part of my theme at my camp. And I tell these new parents as they come in, I say, just like you were saying, Eric, I said, if I could add another star to my star points, kind of thing, it would be swim, because that is a life skill that you need. It's New Jersey. There's a beach, there's a Delaware River. Like there's pools in kids' backyards, even if you live in Kansas, right? Swim is a life skill that you need, right? But I think another life skill that parents really get nowadays that they feel like it missed a generation now is the relationship skills and the social skills. I think that we have a little window now, interestingly, because the parents, even the young parents now, are like at the very, very cusp of being part of the digital age. You know what I mean? Like they have lived some life without digital technology being like in the forefront of their life. And they remember what it was like not to be tied to electronics. And they understand the value of that. And they understand, that they have an advantage because they can have conversations, with people, and they don't just have to be messaging people through their technology, and they really badly want their kids to be able to have that skill also, right? I feel like these people are working with people in their mid-20s who don't have those skills, and they're like, man, I don't want my kids to end up like this. Like, this is a key. So the way I would frame that though, and kind of put a little more context for the swim angle, and this is like basic sales stuff that I only had to discover because I was searching for how do you sell once I had something new to sell. But the difference between a feature and a benefit, and this is something anybody can Google. There's tons of
research on this, and like you can find all sorts of supplementary information on it. But the difference between a feature and a benefit is that, you know, a feature of listening to the day camp pod is you will get curated conversation, and it's going to be however many minutes long, and it's delivered to your, you know, podcast subscription service. That's the feature. But the benefit is that you're connected to industry leading professionals, and your, you know, your network is expanded, and you're on the cutting edge of the day camp conversation. And so making those translations to, you know, a feature of day camp at Liberty Lake or wherever you're swimming twice a day. The benefit is your kid's going to finish 8 weeks or 6 or however many weeks, and they're going to be able to swim 99% of the time. And so now you're left with being a good parent. People buy all sorts of stuff that make themselves feel like being a good parent, and totally irrational, not necessarily connected to camp, right? So that same kind of that lens of looking at it from the screen free time, Andy, I think is so huge. Every camp that doesn't allow kids to have phones in some way can be connecting the relationship building, but like tying it to you could call it self-directed time where the kids are just learning how to just manage themselves. So they're going to, you know, be interrupted less at dinner by questions about going to get the iPad back. Like that's the benefit. It was like better quality family time in the fall, right? Like, so distilling that message to however you get it, I think is such a valuable sales kind of point there, because when you're searching for a replacement to daycare, you're not thinking about having a family conversation with fewer iPads.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's a great idea, that benefit versus the feature thing. I think you need to add a slide to our presentation at Tri-State, Eric.
Can I also say, I think that's really scalable for the soft skills and those communication, leadership, relationship building, all those buzzwords for parents. I think that is a really transferable feature to benefit aspect for a lot of different types of camps to be able to sell. So yes, it may be better family time, but the social emotional skills that kids are getting. So your feature of your camp is we're a tech-free space, or we use it only in programming, and kids are really disconnecting from a device. The benefit of that is they are going back to school in September with better self-management, better self-regulation, relationship skills, because they did not have that device to be looking at. We build programs that encourage them to figure out who they are and interact with other people. That the benefit is they are going to walk away stronger in those areas because they've started in our camp program.
Right. So what we're saying here is, and this is great, this is the feature versus the benefit, right? Is that we cannot assume that they understand the benefit, right? Because they've never been to camp, right? So I think that many of us are victims of just explaining the features, thinking that they're going to take it to the next step and assume the benefit. Right. What am I saying that right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I actually think it's the opposite. I think what we end up saying is the summation of all of the benefits is what, if you grew up in a camp, you know it most well. You know, like I have camp friends that I could call on in 40 states, and like that sort of like depth of the benefits that you experience, you have a hard time breaking down and connecting, right? So like, I would say, I wouldn't even include it, but like at Elmwood Day Camp, I learned I got the Red Cross progression, and I did all the guppies to an orca, and because of that, I can go surfing with my camp friends. Or like the feature was like a Red Cross, progression. And that, I think the big gap is when we fail to connect specific features to the specific benefit and then tie all the benefits together, right? Because that's really
So the benefits are kind of the outcomes.
Yeah.
The benefits of the outcome, but the summation of all of the outcomes is why everybody loves camp, because it's like, that's why you get to fail, but it's okay. And there's people there, and Andy plays the guitar, and he's so cool. And I can be like him when I go to college. Like we get all turned around from there's so many benefits, we trip on them. like what are the three, maybe even the one?
Mm-hmm.
right? And so for like to make it more specific, at the Berkshire Soccer Academy, you know, the real core benefit is girls get to develop the sport that they love and more. So they get this whole player experience. That's it. The core benefit, they have a whole player experience. So they're getting physical, technical, tactical, mental, emotional soccer stuff, but then they're also living in a cabin, meeting friends from other states and countries, meeting counselors that played in college or that didn't, or that played in high school and just like art now. And so that holistic thing, you have to encapsulate it with language in order to make it transferable. Otherwise it's just too big. It's too heavy.
Yeah,
Right.
I think selling the benefits is a great, you know, just a great strategy, because, you know, we ultimately, like a lot of these new communities that we've been reaching out to, immigrant communities, for example, you know, they want their kids to be integrated. They want them to succeed in the corporate world, for example. And we have, you know, we did a campaign at one time where we had people who are working in, you know, executive positions who are, you know, writing testimonials about how they got the, you know, foundation for, you know, their management experience, you know, from working at camp. And so it's something that we've tried to highlight, and I think it you know, resonates well with those people.
That's a perfect example. And so this is where sales gets a little bit of a bad rap, I think. And I was speaking to another group of camp professionals. I kind of said this, that all of our camp social emotional skills get tested in the sales environment. And so if you can code switch who you're talking to and pick the benefit that's going to land for them that's most relevant, that's a highly evolved conversational skill, to not waste their time talking about something they don't need. I mean, and it feels slimy, like you're selling a different part to different people, but that's just a good conversation, right? So in your instance of an immigrant family is worried about their kids getting a job and having an advantage, right? So the benefit is you're going to be more employable and be higher performing if you can work well with others as an employee at Robinhood, and as a camper, as I said, it's the whole thing. You know, throughout the child's life, we're going to help you make them employable.
I have a story that goes with that just from this week, focusing on what a parent wants. So I had a parent call and she said, "You're more expensive than this other camp nearby, but my husband went to your camp 30 years ago." And I had her on email so I could see the last name. And I go, "Is your husband Ryan?" And she goes, "Yes. How did you remember that?" So to her, the most important part was this tradition. And so that's what I honed in on, because, yeah, it was more expensive. So what are you going to do?
Well, that's quite fortunate.
Dang, Sam, that is vicious. That's great. So
30 years. Don't tell me you were his bunk counselor. That's all I want.
But did you remember it or look it up?
Oh, you're on mute, Sam. You muted yourself.
There we go. I remembered it, because doing all the paperwork, sometimes if a name's unique, you can get the other half. And he was around my son's age. So then it clicked, okay, this is probably the guy.
All right, so that's a unique situation. But going back to the segmentation aspect, Eric, right? Having like profiles for your camp family. So Eric's camp, I was busting his chops earlier. I said, in a way he's got it easier because he's looking for girls that want to play soccer, right? Our day camps, right? I'm fishing in the ocean for 4 to 15-year-old kids, right? It's a very wide range. And some are from the city and some are from farmlands and some are affluent and some aren't affluent and everything in between. And I think that because in the day camp world, we're selling, just use that word that Eric used, to the masses. Like we're selling en masse across and because of that, we have to water down a little bit. Everything has to become sort of like middle of the road, sell to everybody, right? Because you've got a page on your website for the preschoolers and you've got a page on your website for your teens, right? But generally speaking, you're talking about these features and benefits for all. right? That cover hundreds and hundreds of kids, right? So I think it really behooves us as day camp people to sort of drill down and find out these segments and go after those specific segments. Because it's been great for me in honing in on Philadelphia, right? This one city, right? And what are people looking for? And what are the aspects of the experience that they love, which is outdoors and no electronics. That's a huge thing for them. And they generally the parents are generally wired a certain way. And it's been great to be able to just market towards them. And then in suburbia, it's still a wide swath. So I struggle with that. So, unless you're going to hire the camper machine and have 29 different automated marketing systems going out to these different people, it's hard. It's hard for camp.
I think, Andy, that's a point before you get to the sales part. You as a day camp person have to do that research, and you have to maybe pick a market or pick an age group and do the work to figure out what they're looking for, what they are spending their money on. And so the correlation for me is that as ACA, before I was speaking at conferences, trying to connect with people, I would attend the conference and I would say, there's this whole group of parks and recreation professionals, and I don't know how many of them are engaged with ACA. I need to go be in their spaces and hear what they're talking about and hear what their needs are to then be able to connect what ACA can do for them or offer them. So are day camp directors putting themselves in those spaces, in those Facebook groups, looking at what after school organizations are offering to say, okay, this is what the parents in this community are paying for 10 months. How am I offering some version of this in camp? Or how do I prove to them that this is a benefit of my camp program, right? Because they are committing to it during the year. They are saying, my kid needs to have this amount of time filled. They need to walk away with this skill, or this is an interest of theirs and I'm willing to pay for it. So how do you bridge that to your camp connection?
To the day camp, for that applied in the day camp, I think the next level, I'm going to add a slice into this pyramid of the hierarchy of needs. There's something that, you want kids early as possible, right? And so focusing on the 5-year-olds starting to 7-year-olds is going to be a great thing versus developing these niche for the 8th graders, right? But so with that, the thing that every kid needs that many day camps offer is this exposure, this capacity exposure. So what do you have access to, and highlighting the staff? And that's where I think Allie's point of looking at what you got and kind of the research, even reflectively of what people say about you. Like people probably said that Andy's camp was an inclusive place before Andy was saying, come because it's an inclusive place. Like kind of the asking for feedback from parents about what's the best part. Why do you share for camp?
No, that's great.
And then magnifying that and then saying, hey, look, we're this place. And if sometimes it's the right fit and it's an easy kind of thing to highlight, sometimes not, maybe something you want to fix. But I think that like your program, that, because we keep using it as an example, as in the woods and screen free, is perfectly matched to what people want from Philadelphia. It's called leaving the urban environment, leaving where like parents work, so they might have more screen access or whatever. And so finding that where your strong suit is someone else's weakness, or what they want, so finding that match is really, like, even in Sam's example of like new families, you could probably get a list of people that bought new houses that and send them a flyer, and it's like that flyer would be pretty different than the look at all the programs we have flyer.
Potentially.
But so that's just the whole process of having the identity and the users. Like, this is what we talked about in the presentation, about having those user personas. And yes, it's a little bit easier if you're a specialty camp, but I think your specialty is created when you stack these filters together. Who's running the camp? What's the facility? What kind of program kind of stuff do you have? Like your specialty really emerges. Like a lot of camps get this bad rap of like, they're all the same. But food is not all the same. Food is totally the reflection of the directors and what they want to spend money on. If they care about it, if they want to do gluten-free, if they want to do cookies, if they want to do firecracker pops, like all this, like, so I think really leaning into what you've got and what people say about those things makes it so much easier to pick what to highlight to who.
So, Allison mentioned, surveying your parents and talking to parents and focus groupy kind of information. I think that is really important because, like Eric, you mentioned, you put my lady Wittenberg. Inside joke. I'm sorry. You just made me laugh. So Eric said, you're looking for these young kids, these kindergarten, these 5-year-olds, right? Because they're your annuity at a day camp. They can come to you for years, right? But I know, because I know my market, because they're non-camp people, they are really reluctant to let go of their younger ones. And actually, it made me feel a lot better when I sort of just resigned myself to that and then focused on getting kids as they were transitioning into middle school, because that's when these kids get smartphones and play too many video games and their parents are losing their mind. And all of a sudden they'll pay double for camp on something that the cost benefit analysis for a 5-year-old wasn't kicking. Now all of a sudden it's kicking for a 10-year-old, right?
That's a perfect example though. And this is something I'm actually working on a separate kind of like training on how to look into your data, especially if you're a CampMinder person. I've used CampMinder for day camp and residential camp. So looking at that data of where do you get kids and where do you lose kids? Like just baseline, like over the last 4 years, when does the average kid start? How old are they? Like something's working there. Right. So Andy, your point of focusing on those kids that have a higher pain point, or the parents have a higher pain point around there. Mm-hmm. That's brilliant. And because who's going to come with them? Their little siblings. Mm-hmm. But so that's great. That's sort of data informed segmentation. There isn't a lot of guidance on that out in the world that camp people will find and or accept, in my experience. Right. Like I had to translate all this stuff from like intuit.com, like they make TurboTax. I'm like, I learned about user personas from them. So I'm like trying to code switch everything at the camp space so it makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's a business thing. No doubt about it. And just sort of tying this up a little bit because we gotta move on here. But the your camp's reputation is so important, and that in a way transcends many to many, even the features and benefits, right? When these new people hear about this great place and they're just getting these positive vibes from people, from word of mouth, that's really the all important, So having a great summer, kicking butt during the summer, and having your choir that you're already preaching to, having them preach to the non-informed, that comes off a lot better than you preaching to them, because you're the business person selling, right? But from the friends who are telling their friends at their locals at the soccer game how amazing this camp was, right? That is worth its weight in gold.
Totally. And there's a hybrid version of that, and what kind of Ali said about the researching piece. This is something I applied from Seth Godin. So he was talking about it in terms of his book creation. He's an author and the marketing. He actually spoke at Tri-State as a keynote a couple years ago. But something he said he does before he writes a book, as he goes and looks at the feedback and review sections of other books in the category, and specifically the bad ones. Like if you bought a book on marketing and you thought it was totally miserable and missed the mark, why and what were you looking for? And then in that plain language, he'll use that to inform what he creates next. And so that's something that, like, looking at what people didn't like about your experience, but also like your competitors, right? Like, or not even competitors, the alternatives, right? Like the daycares, if there are daycares in the area, what did people say if they went there for the summer that they're looking for, whether it was great or not? Because that plain language of what people say is what will become the referral word of mouth buzz that Andy's talking about.
All right. I think we have to move on to our program tips of the week, but thank you so much for your wisdom there, Eric and Ali. And we'll get back to you with your tip in a second. But for my first tip, I wanted to stay along these lines, as I usually try to do. And because one thing we didn't touch on for these new families is it's a cost benefit analysis, right? You got to think of a big scale in their brains, right? And the cost thing is a prohibitive thing, right? So, I mean, look, Sam's got a rec program and she's getting her chops busted about cost. You know, Lord knows what these private camps, you know, what people think. So, you know, I'm a big believer that once they drink my Kool-Aid, they will like it, and then they will come back and pay regular price, right? So I will literally give it away to get people to try it, to incentivize people for a first time. So one thing I got from my friend Adam Wallach, he was on, I don't know, a dozen podcasts ago from Mohawk, back when he was trying to resurrect a small camp. We all do camp fairs. We all do these kind of things where there's other camps there. And here, write your name down and you can win something and kind of thing, right? So what he would do, which I have stolen from him gracefully, is fill this out and you can win 2 weeks of camp. You have to buy 2 weeks of camp, but you will get 2 weeks of camp for free also. Okay. So I did a camp fair this weekend. I got, you know, a dozen people to fill it out. And guess what? Everyone won. All right. Because I don't give a hoot. I want people to come. I don't care if it's half price. And if they love this and they have 5-year-olds, Eric, or 7-year-olds or whatever, then they could come for 5, 6, 7 more years. Right. And tell all their friends and be part of the choir that's preaching. Right. So I just think that sometimes these people, these neophytes, these people just don't get it. They think that Crystal Lake has a guy with an axe running around. Right. They need to get pushed over the fence somehow, you know. And sometimes it needs to be an aggressive push. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen. So that's mine. I'm handing off to you, Sam.
So along that lines, I broken down to 1 week sessions. So I always tell them it's only a week. Just give me 2 days. And if you don't like it in 2 days, I'll give you a full refund.
Nice.
They're in.
Nice. I love that stuff.
So my tip of the day, I was really excited about a staff training thing I'm looking into, so I thought I'd share it. We have a local therapy barn, and I think a lot of communities have horseback riding programs for special needs. They're also good for training your inclusion staff, and a lot of them will do a half day with your inclusion staff with the horses, teaching them nonverbal communication and being aware of their surroundings and that kind of thing. So we're going to try that out with my inclusion aides this time.
Interesting. Cool. All right, Aaron.
So for me, I have sort of a marketing tip that something we tried a few years ago, and it was a different approach. It ended up being a lot of work, but it was it's definitely something unique for the community. We basically, you know, I'm sure everybody gets calls from, you know, most camps get calls from vendors that are looking to, you know, partner with you or, you know, have you, you know, pay for them to come in and provide something for the kids. So instead of doing that, we held on to these vendors in a database, and we organized a trade show at the camp during just before one of our open houses that we do early on in the season. And we had them set up their vendor booths, and we didn't charge them to be there. They didn't, you know, and they benefited from, you know, our promoting the open house, and they, you know, were promoting their, you know, their presence or their, you know, their booth that they had there. And so we got a ton of people that came to this open house. It was like the biggest that we ever had. Did we sign up a ton of new kids from that? We, you know, probably 1% of those, maybe 2% of the new people that were on site signed up, but those were, you know, those were new people that we otherwise wouldn't have gotten. So we had a ton of people, and it was a you know, busy day that the benefit wasn't huge, but, you know, getting those 1 or 2 new people, and it didn't cost us anything to, you know, to have those vendors there, you know, was a great way to introduce people to, you know, to the camp, get them there, see what we do, hear from us directly, you know, learn that we have swimming there, or what, you know, whatever it is that benefit is that we're trying to promote. And, you know, and our hope was that, you know, residually that we grew our base, if not in that year, in the future. So it was unique. It was something that we tried.
That's awesome. That made me think of something else. You know, we could do an entire podcast on synergizing with local businesses, by the way, because I think it's super important. And as day camps, where we can do that way better than our friend up in the Berkshires up there can. So one thing we did at Liberty Lake that we continue to do is that when we have relationships with local businesses and local businesses that our camp parents are involved in, right? So if you have camp families that run a local this or a local that and all that kind of thing, when we do sort of like these all camp kind of events, like we do a meet and greet before camp starts where kids come out and meet their counselors, and we do a family night in the middle of the summer, right? On those events, we'll invite those local vendors to come out and do what you were talking about, Aaron. I have them set up a table. I ask them to do something interactive, so it's not just like they're sitting there, behind a desk kind of thing. But yeah, that kind of thing, it brings a lot of goodwill, right? And it shows that you're a part of the community, right? You're not just sucking from the teat of the community. You're also like part of helping it all out and all. So yeah, I think those are great things. So, all right, Mulaney. You're up.
I'm going to go with a programming tip. So I figured we'd be talking about marketing all day. So this is it's probably more of a reminder. This is not new news, but that personalities, especially in the day camp scene, personalities can themselves be activities. And those are the most unique, right? So I was recapping this to Allison. That's like a genealogy of this. So a guy at Elmwood Day Camp, when we were younger and working there, he ran maintenance club. He was like your quintessential camp PE coach guy. And he just took pride in the way things were, the way like a great PE teacher and coach will do. So bats had to be lined up. And it was so like kids, like 6-year-old boys and girls were just like helping him clean up. So it inspired, in the right time in the summer, my guess would be like around 4 or 5, once everybody's like settled in. He ran maintenance club. So for a week, first and second graders were choosing to spend an activity period with him and a rake going around making camp beautiful. And it was kind of an ode to like the groundskeeper people too. Cause it was just a beautiful experience to see. And the kids just loved it. So anything can be an activity with the right personality. It was Joe. Like you were signing up to be with and around Joe Kearns, if he's listening. But so, and then that inspired me years later. I created Glue Club at Elmwood Day Camp. Literally the equipment supply list was like 4 gallons of Elmer's glue. That's it. We met on the grass. We like peeled off glue handprints, decoupaged them, took them home. But like a little squirt of glue. This was around the era of Ashton Kutcher and Punk'd. So like, if you got a high five from a staff member with like a little dab of Elmer's glue, it's like splat, and like you got glued, and then you'd like hug afterwards because this wasn't like meant to be like hurtful. But so the timing of that request to the staff to be like, okay, who's got something that kids are drawn to that they can totally make? It's like the most unique thing ever is something that's tied to the rapport and the reputation somebody's created in the first couple of weeks of camp. I just think that's the best play for turn personalities into activities.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, the maintenance, anything related to maintenance facilities, those folks have an air about them that the kids are just somehow, they're like mysterious people and they want in on it, and especially you're involving hammers and things like that. I know at Ivy League, they had a similar one where it was called Build a Shed with whoever the guy's name was. Right. And they built a shed with, and the kids could not have been more thrilled.
That's perfect. But let me clarify. Joe Kearns, the guy that was maintenance club, he was an athletic instructor. He's just a PE teacher that was running stuff. And he happened to take pride. So he created maintenance club as an activity instead of teaching kids softball. Like,
Have you noticed the new commercials for Facebook for all the groups? Right now they're talking about all the clubs on Facebook and all the different, special interest groups.
Well,
man.
I don't know how you can do better than
Glue Club.
I don't know how you can do better than Glue Club.
I will just say
although I just want to say, Sam, when we were kids, it probably would have been Rubber Cement Club. But
well, I have to tell you, I'm enjoying this for a lot of reasons, but the trip down memory lane that I did not realize I'd be taking, what Eric is not sharing are 2 great parts of that aspect of which were he definitely was known as the Glue Master, and there was a song that went with that, and then there was also a series of weeks where kids are marching around camp chanting "peel, don't wash" as like a pitch to never wash your hands, but let it dry and be stuck to, and then have the joy of peeling the glue off. I mean, it really took on a life of its own. Side note, I'll share, I had a passion for bocce, which I've probably played in my backyard 5 times, and my cousin and I created Bocce Club and stretched it across 5 days. And just the magic, that is so the magic of day camp, right? So how do you take that and pitch that? And just thinking about, mine is a different, not program, not marketing tip, but in thinking about what makes camp special and how you're going to capitalize on that, right? So not every camp is the same. If you asked anybody who worked at Elmwood, a big part of being a staff member there is the staff rec program, so staff recreation, which I was a participant in throughout my time working there and was lucky enough to co-lead it with several people. But at our camp, every week there was some sort of staff rec activity after camp hours. So you knew that there was this built-in social time where you could network, meet other staff members, and then have fun together in a healthy, physical, whatever way. So, you know, I think it originated more with like softball tournaments and things like that, but then it really grew. And while I was there, we ran a staff Olympics where, you know, staff got to have the same fun experience that the kids had during the day, but really a little bit more adult driven with a little bit more fun or humor or things built in. It also allowed everybody to capitalize their time during the day to be really focused on the kids and say, pour everything you can into making this Olympics all about the kids because you get your time Thursday afternoon. And we had surprise events like synchronized swimming. I mean, it was like a silent cleanup, like all those fun things that a lot of resident camps do, maybe with their older kids, but staff got to have it. And I think it also lent itself to the magic of Elmwood, which was we know that the people working here are not all about sports, right? At our camp for our kids, we're trying to develop interests in magic or glue or Mario Kart or soccer or Gaga, and that same kind of methodology translated to the staff. So we had an open mic night, we started a game night, we had, you know, ended with a banquet at the end of the summer, which I know a lot of day camps do, but those things really, if you were to ask anybody who worked at Elmwood, even for a summer or 20, the staff rec component and that chance to kind of bond and have their own adult development, which again, with the staff right now, they are also needing those relationship skills and team building opportunities just as much as our 5-year-olds. So it was really an important part of my time there. And some of my highlights, memories, friends came from staff rec.
It's awesome.
So I have to just tie that up with a bow with that. Bobby, our mom, Bobby Wittenberg, and Jeff would say that was probably the best net impact for the kids of that whole like a really blossomed staff rec calendar was both why staff came back, because if you screw up and get fired or don't come back, left out of that your summer social calendar. But really the big impact for the kids is that, and this is, I think I'm going to credit my mom with this phrase that we had in the house, but it would apply here, that, you know, you have to own it before you can share it, especially for something that's new. And so for a lot of high school and staff at a day camp, they might not have been at the same day camp or had the same exposures to that community there at Olympics. So if they could know that they had their own event, they were going to be for them, it was way easier to share it with the kids when it was the kids' time. So that definitely, that's a great pro tip, Elle.
But also glue. So
don't forget the glue, though.
Can we get just maybe the refrain of the Glue Master song?
You know, I knew you were going to say that.
I was going to say, is there something that's behind the scenes or like a follow-up to the podcast? Where
I can beatbox it if you want.
I think that we can save the mashup for a separate live event.
All right.
Maybe if you come to the tri-state session, you get the live.
No, I would say this: we were going to have Eric back for an automated marketing session, but if we're not going to get the glue song, I don't know.
Also, it needs some context. So I already mentioned that we had an Elmwood tape back in the day.
Yeah.
So one of I don't know if it was on the tape, but one of the Elmwood songs was the Music Master.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's on the tape.
It's on the tape, right? So we just I'm also remembering the pinnacle of Glue Club was we made a flag with the peeled palm print of the kids in the club at the end of the week.
Yes.
Glued over it marched around singing Peel Don't Wash, and it was, I am the glue master, I come from the glue town. You can't peel it, you can't peel it. Peel, 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 peel.
Wow.
It's a real thing. It's a real thing.
Andy, adjust anything because now that's part of your camp origin story.
Listen,
Camp moment.
That's a peak camp origin story right there. So look, across the world, what are we up to now, Aaron? 44 countries? All right.
I think,
like there's going to be like a Ukrainian, glue club.
I'm going to have to go buy some domains now because everybody else is going to have the ideas.
Peel don't wash. You need that.com.
Peeldon'twash.com is mine. Stay away.
Saying that does not make it happen. You better get online right now, buddy. I feel like this is like John Oliver we're falling into now.
It goes to show you that's, the $100,000 climbing walls and, playgrounds and all that stuff.
Exactly.
Kids remember the most about their experiences, stuff like that. So, it's like, hopefully there's, I'm sure there's thousands of other people that are doing unique things like that kids are going to remember for the rest of their lives.
Yep.
A fun bus ride and some construction paper and glue. Back to basics.
Allie and Eric Wittenberg, thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us and sharing such tales from Elmwood lore. Maybe as Jeff Ackerman's getting his Lifetime Achievement Award at Tri-State, we can sort of, supplement it with a little song in the background. So anyway, I want to also thank our Go Camp Pro executive producer, Travis Allison, our producer, Matt Hansberger, and our dedicated sponsors, ACA New York and New Jersey, commercial recreation specialists, and AM Skyer for allowing us to bring this podcast to you. If you don't want to miss an episode of the Day Camp Pod, then you should subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or Google. Give us a nice rating while you're at it. And check out our show notes for this and other episodes. And Eric, you should put in the show notes. You just put that what was that graphic about with the circles of like what I'm talking about?
I'll make the sales hierarchy of needs.
Yeah. Eric's got some great slides that we'll get up there. So that'll all be up at daycamppodcast.com. All right. So thanks for listening, making yourself a better day camp professional. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of the Day Camp Podcast.